Test, test. There we go. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming, enduring the mist that we're experiencing this morning. Welcomed. My name is Lucas Seibert. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Ojai. I've been here for 6 years. What you're here to see is a PowerPoint presentation being kind of put up on myself. I also have Daniel here with Venture Tiny Homes. He is one of the builders. He has the experience and expertise as to building them from the ground up. He'll be a part of the presentation as well. I wanted to also let you know that after the workshop and after the questions, which we'll get to at the end, there is also an open house at one of the tiny homes that has been sited recently at 207 North Montgomery Street. So I want to invite you to that as well. It's a walking tour. Hold the questions to the end, please. And then that will also be available from 11 to 3 on Sunday as well. So with that, we'll start the presentation. Once again, I want to thank everybody for coming. This is being recorded, but not live streamed. And then the recording will be uploaded to our website as a part of the landing page for the tiny homes as we move forward here. So what we're talking about this morning is movable tiny homes. And as an overview, we're really going to be talking about some of the context as it relates to tiny homes, really kind of what is a tiny home, the pilot program that went forward as a part of City Council's approvals and ordinances, and then kind of getting into the weeds on some of the construction pieces and the timeline and process to get that tiny home sited within the city. Context, I think we all understand this and we hear this all the time on the news. The state of California is faced with a housing crisis. We have in our bailiwick, which is what all cities have in California, which is a housing element, which identifies needs. And then from that, there's goals that each city is then bound to. Tiny homes is actually one of the programs that we have built in that speaks to ways in which to bring them in, to make them kind of affordable by design to a certain degree. And within the programs themselves, we actually have a program that talked about what we're going to be doing today, which is an open house, kind of modeling what a tiny home looks like and kind of experiencing it firsthand. So kind of like a rough definition, tiny homes are self-contained dwellings that are often mobile and can be placed on a trailer for easy transportation. Do not confuse that with what an accessory dwelling unit is, an ADU. Those are built, stick-built on site, where we have this as a tiny home is typically on chassis. It can be sited and brought on and craned in, but it has a separate option and it has a separate kind of process tied to that as well. Now, the benefits of a tiny home are increase in affordable housing by design, increase in infill development, and really what that means, it's kind of a technical planning nerdy term, as opposed to building new homes and increasing and kind of doing that sprawl effect. What we're talking about here is using existing land and something going in your backyard or your side yard, wherever that fits. The history of tiny homes as an ordinance and as a discussion piece really kind of started in 2016, but then kind of had a heading in 2018 with City Council, Planning Commission, and the community really kind of coming together to figure out, hey, are we going to move forward with some sort of an ordinance? At that time, Council gave the nod not to move forward, but it was revisited in 2021, which then brought forward what's referred to as the Tiny Home Pilot Program. And that was an ordinance that really was a 2-year pilot program that allowed for up to 10 homes or 10 tiny homes to be sited within the city each year. And then from that, an evaluation. And that evaluation came forward in 2023. When that evaluation came forward in 2023, we had 2 that were cited and 1 that was in final, moving towards final review. So we actually, in the city, we have 3 in total right now. But that's it's kind of an interesting piece because the pilot program gave a ceiling, recognizing that if it was a flood, we'd put a cap on it. The reality is that, and I'll talk about this in the next slide, is there's barriers, and those barriers ended up deterring individuals from moving forward with this process. So some of those barriers include third-party ANSI inspection requirement that was fairly strict and fairly difficult to comply with. A lack of specific guidelines due to ANSI. Say it out loud. American National Standards Institute, yes. So hold on. So your question, and I'll pause just for a moment to first ask the question through here and then to answer it. So your question is it's been vacillating for 7 years. When are we going to do something about it? So in 2018, when there was no decision made, in 2021, there was a decision made, which was the pilot program for 2 years. That sunset in 2023. At that time, council gave the green light to move forward with an ordinance. The ordinance process itself requires us to first develop an ordinance from the ground up, not a pilot program, but an ordinance. And then from there, get feedback and take it through the process. That process includes public hearings as well as determination by city council. So recently, 2 meetings ago, city council took action on as a first reading for an ordinance for tiny homes. And that is a separate ordinance from what was originally the ordinance. So your question is when are we going to be allowed to put tiny homes in? Once the ordinance goes through second reading and 30 days thereafter. So right now it's on first reading. We're doing the workshop as requested by council. And then once the workshop concludes and we have the open house this weekend, we'll be moving forward with the second reading with city council. So that'll be coming forward probably at the end of May, first part of June. Correct. That's what we're looking. Yeah, so your question is are we going to be able to build? And the response is you'll be able to submit applications and then go through the process, which will be much, much simpler from what it was previously. Correct.
What happens at the second? So you could get it.
Correct. Yeah, there is this process that's still in play. As a second reading, if there's an outcry of individuals, the question is if there's an outcry from individuals not wanting it, it could delay the review and the process of it. Because once the second reading comes in, it takes effect 30 days thereafter. If the question is how long will the delay be, and I don't have a timeline for the delay. It depends on what ends up coming to city council in terms of concerns. It's one of the reasons why we're having this workshop today, to vet some of that. Yeah, it's a process. I do know that there's a process. What?
You don't know what will be allowed.
So the question the question is do I have a definitive timeline? I have a definitive timeline on when we're going to be bringing it back for second reading. Now, what happens at that meeting is what happens at that meeting. Yeah. It's an open council meeting, yes. we've got to go through this process. Correct. Hold on. Lots of questions and comments. I'm loving it. Here's the thing. Let me finish the PowerPoint, and then we'll go into the Q&A, because that's really when I'm going to have you come up and speak into the mic so that we're catching all these, okay? Because before I go any further, one of the things that I'm wanting to do with this is the questions that you have, even if I answer them and I have Daniel answer them, or if someone in the audience provides an answer, I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. We're putting that into a FAQ, which will be living on the website as well. So you'll have that information, and it'll be something that we'll be providing and available. All right. So, okay, thank you. And the gentleman, I mean, does everybody know who? Yeah, I get it. If I can at the end, if anybody has his name or information, I can reach out to him. He just needs the information. Really, that's what that boils down to. Okay, so tiny homes development certification process. From a development standpoint, really, in order to develop, we really want you to do your research, which is, it seems odd to say that, but a lot of times we have people coming in and they're like, I want to do it. When can I do it? Can I do it tomorrow? And the answer is there's a process. There's an application. You've really got to go through the process, provide all the information, and then we move forward. If you're assuming that it's simple, I think the idea with the revisions to the ordinance is to simplify the process and to simplify the requirements. But still, the requirements remain. The ANSI standards, that is something that remains. That's not something we're changing. We're saying you need to follow those standards. Those standards aren't typical of stick-built construction. It's a little bit different in terms of how it operates, right? I don't have a building inspector going out and doing those inspections. Instead, you have a third-party inspector, which we're aware of now, and we'll be providing you information on that, would be doing the inspections. So, permitting process, I kind of just went over this right now, but we're here to help. The Community Development Department is here to help, not necessarily to be a deterrent, but to provide you with information. And then from that information, you're empowered in terms of which way or which direction you want to go, or how large. You have some parameters at that point. And some of these pictures are ones that have been cited. Some of them are stock photos. This actually happens to be a photo of one that was cited in Carpinteria. Yeah. The question is was there a size limit? I want to make sure we catch that one. Yes, there is. It's 400 square feet. Less than 400 square feet. So 399. Okay, so from a building standpoint, while the unit is being built or before a pre-built one is installed, any on-site utilities will need to be installed and inspected by the city. So that is not necessarily the utilities themselves. The utilities are typically handled through the various private agencies. So Ojai Valley Sanitation and Ojai Valley Water. Those would be your ones that would be doing the inspections. The pad piece, hold on. The pad piece is something we would be doing the inspections on. So you would have the inspector out there for that. Once the pad is certified and there, that's really when ANSI takes over in terms of the construction. The pad piece is the foundation. Yes, thank you. Sorry. So if I'm using terms that you're unfamiliar with, stop me. If I'm using acronyms that you're unfamiliar with, please stop me because I'll explain those. Yes, a pad is required. What we're looking at is variations to the pad. Good question. So the question came in, is a pad required? In the pilot program, it was required. In this new ordinance that's gone through first reading, it is required. What we're looking at is there's a potential alternative to materials. Because right now, the pad has to be concrete. So the question is regardless of compaction and perk tests, yes. It's a good FAQ, which will be covered in the FAQ document. Thank you. So final inspection, after installation, a final inspection will take place before the homeowner can receive a certificate of occupancy. And really the certificate of occupancy is a tag or a license that ends up going on the tiny home itself. So certification, I kind of already been mentioning this through the questions that have come in, but it's each home will require ANSI, which is the American National Standards Institute for Certification, as well as a California DMV registration. Because it is on wheels, it has to go through that party as well and get their blessing. The question is, does it have to be on wheels? And the answer is no. It has to start on wheels. It can be then sited on site and kind of function to look kind of like an ADU, but it has that ability then to be brought off site and then placed on chassis again. It would be, so from a building standpoint, so the question is does it have to be connected to the slab? From a building standpoint, and more than likely from an ANSI standpoint, it would. So, but that's a great question for an FAQ that I can get a response to, but I'm almost for certain that it would. All right. All right, next slide. So from a processing standpoint, really you're looking at ANSI, the ANSI standards, and the third-party ANSI inspectors coming out and doing their inspections. Those inspections can be either in person or virtual. The inspections themselves actually don't differ from how we operate here at City Hall through the Community Development Department. Our inspections can be in person or they can be virtual. There have been times where a contractor is asking for an inspection. They're out, I have an inspector out doing something else. They submit something or they show a video of their inspection. And if it passes, we move forward. Sure. So the question is why does this require an ANSI standard certification versus just standard permitting processing through community development or through building? And I'm not going to answer that one because it's kind of a long-winded response, and I think it probably best fits in the ANSI, or not the ANSI, but the FAQ. But there is some differences between the two. Right. Thank you. All right, moving on. So self-built certification. Those wishing to build their tiny homes can use these agencies to certify their own build as well. Really, it's if they wish to complete a partial build, they can have the certification transferred from the building to themselves. I'd almost have Daniel probably answer that one when he comes up. It's a kind of a technical piece. And then final steps, once complete, the tiny home receives, as I had said before, either a sticker or a plate indicating the certification and certifying agency. And really, it's kind of interesting. Unlike a home, when a home is built, it's built, finalized, and everybody just assumes it's good to go. Here, it has to be displayed, which is a little bit different than what you see for a home built from the stick up or the ground up. So some examples. In terms of Ventura, and these are kind of examples from Ventura Tiny Homes. Daniel will get up and speak here in a moment on two other pieces. Some of these are cited recently. Actually, all these are cited within Ventura County, yes? Yes. All right, here's some more examples. Pricing. So in the FAQ, I'm showing a chart here, but in the FAQ, we'll provide a little bit more dialogue and information as to the pricing. And these are kind of the dimensions and the square footage, and it kind of provides you a running list as it increases. This is the price of the build. No, these are tiny homes which are built off-site and then rolled on. Yeah. So the question was, is this the price for them to be built on site? And no, these are the prices, and these are kind of estimated prices. To be fair, okay. So these are So these prices are per Ventura Andes pricing right now. So the question is this the price of it on site, or is this the price at the factory? And the answer is this is the price at the factory. So the question is the city in partnership with Ventura Andes to do these? And the answer is no. We've invited Daniel to come out, be a part of this presentation. I am not the expert when it comes down to tiny homes. Am I the expert in terms of writing the ordinance? Yes. But I'm not the expert in terms of the build. Daniel's the expert in terms of the build, and that's why I brought him on. So challenges and opportunities. It's where we're getting into an area that was heavily discussed with the Planning Commission and has been a point of discussion really since 2018. There was certainly conversation then. It was in conversation again in 2021 versus with the pilot program, but never ended up getting any ground. And that is, there's this option for compostable toilets as an alternative to hooking up to sewer, or even an alternative for septic. However, in the first reading, it's been identified that council's not interested in any sort of septic alternatives. At this point, we'll see if that remains for the second reading. So for the asking for a repeat. So at the first reading, when it went to city council a couple of meetings ago, there was a conversation as to whether or not septic would be even an option for. Septic is different than hooking up to the sewer. Septic is where it's contained on site versus sewer, which is it's all underground and taken off site. Thank you, Carol. Yes, you know the sewer. So compostable toilets was one opportunity that the staff's been looking into. And there's some options here. I almost have Daniel come up and speak to this, because we also have a video that we're going to show here in a minute in terms of a demo for compostable toilets. But it's kind of a new piece, a new wrinkle that we've been looking into. And one of the reasons is the cost for the sewer hookup and the running of the line, the whole construction piece. The connection itself, in terms of hooking up to sewer, just for utility purposes, is running about $16,000 to $17,000. That's just the connection piece, and doesn't include the construction piece tied to that. $16,000 to $17,000. Correct. So the question is connection period. So the question is it a connection to sanitation, or is it a connection to an existing line? And it's a connection to an existing line, regardless. So when you're adding a unit to the property, it's considered to be an additional connection. So it's another unit. So then Ojai Sanitation District looks at it as a new unit, a new price, and that price, that sticker tag right now, is 16 and change. 16,000 and change, not $16 and change.
For $1,000, all they did fee me for the extra fee.
So we'll talk offline regarding the ADU stuff. Okay, so the question was the ADU.
3 years.
3, okay.
It's in the county, but
Sanitary district doesn't care. It was so his question is a response was the ADU was built in the county. Yeah. Sanitation district doesn't care either way. We are still on track, yes. Oh, yeah, nope. Okay. Okay, thank you. Excellent question. So the question is this going to be available online? So we're not streaming live. Instead, this is being recorded, and this will be part of the landing page for the tiny homes. The PowerPoint as well. Yes. So typically with these, and it's the same thing when we did the formula businesses a few years ago, everything that we had done at that point, we put online so it was available. You could download it. Absolutely. Okay, so do we cover everything here? This is just a sample of one of the models. There's a number of different models. This is referred to as a Sunmar Centrex. This is one we keep finding online in our initial research. The photo looks a little dated. It is kind of odd, but the compostable toilet idea and premise behind it, this is really kind of what it looks like. One of the examples from a compostable toilet standpoint. And this is one where it takes that waste and then diverts it into this holding tank. James, do I need to do anything to start the video, or do you start it? He starts it.
Founded in 1979, Sunmar remains today the world leader in composting toilet technology. With a Sunmar composting toilet, you can eliminate up to half of your water use and protect your groundwater at the same time. It's the odorless environmental solution that can be installed anywhere, quickly and easily, with no need for plumbing. In North America, we flush approximately 7 billion gallons of drinking quality water down the toilet every single day. This same water all too often ends up right back in our lakes and groundwater. Sunmar's environmentally friendly composting toilets offer a much better solution to waste treatment. Elegant and simple, many Sunmar composting toilets use no water at all, require no plumbing or sewer connections, and are 100% non-polluting. They can be quickly and easily installed anywhere at a fraction of the cost of a septic system. Sunmar composting toilets optimize and accelerate the natural process of evaporation and decomposition by evaporating liquids and odorlessly transforming waste into a useful fertilizing soil. Toilet waste is over 90% water content. As it composts, moisture is released, and this is evaporated and exhausted through the venting system, leaving only a very small amount of nutrient-rich soil. Sunmar units are all conveniently pre-assembled, and many models do not require any plumbing connections. Installation is usually completed in just a short time. Starting a Sunmar is easy. First, add some of the peat mix and microbe mix we supply with the unit. Then, add some water. That's all there is to it. Your Sunmar is ready to use. Maintenance of your unit is very simple. Periodically, add peat mix and rotate the handle to turn the biodrum. Eventually, finished compost is removed from the finishing drawer. Sunmar dominates the North American market and manufactures over 20 models of composting toilets to suit almost any application. This includes a variety of electric and non-electric models, as well as waterless and low flush systems. Sunmar self-contained units offer the convenience of indoor facilities in places where there is no plumbing. Since no water connections are needed, installation is quick and easy. Sunmar self-contained units come in different shapes and sizes. Our Space Saver model is small enough to be installed in a small closet. The elegant Sunmar Compact will complement any bathroom. Sunmar central units are two-part systems. In the bathroom, either a low-flush China toilet or a Sunmar dry toilet is installed. The composting unit is positioned at a lower level. Sunmar central units are available with or without electricity, with waterless and water flush toilets, and in different sizes for different capacities. Sunmar units have no equal. When it comes to performance and quality, all Sunmar units deliver. Safe, reliable, odor-free. Only Sunmar composting toilets have been tested and certified by the National Sanitation Foundation for residential use. Sunmar can be used residentially to quickly and easily add an extra toilet or reduce the loading on an older septic system. Also, Sunmar units can be used at eco-resorts, hunting and fishing lodges, cottages, camps, cabins, bunkies, and boathouses. Sunmar units also work well in barns, stables, workshops, garages, pool houses, and greenhouses. Other applications include mines, oil rigs, parking garages, warehouses, guard booths, and construction sites. In fact, just about anywhere. To determine which model is right for you, please refer to our color catalog, talk to your local Sunmar dealer, or call us directly. Sunmar, the industry leader for environmentally friendly composting toilet solutions.
Okay. There's your example. Now, I just want to preface this with Sunmar is only an example. We're not promoting this at all. It was the one that we found online that kind of gave us kind of a good look at what it does and how it functions. There was a longer video that staff has looked at. I'm not going to show that today. Instead, we'll put it on the landing page. It does go into the details on how it functions because there's different models. There's the standing toilet, and then there's the toilet that actually goes into a larger waste facility. And there's the electric option, which is pretty hands-off from what I can tell. But I'm just going to be completely fair. I've never really researched this before, so I'm learning as I go along here too. So the question is are they ADA compliant? I can look into that. Yeah, no? Okay, so look into that to get an official response. I'm hearing a no out in the audience, but we'll get some information back on that. The FAQ, likely there's going to be several questions that are framed around the compostable toilet piece. So with that, we open it up to the community, to you, if you have any questions. I know I've heard some as we've going through this PowerPoint, but any and all questions. And just so you know, if I'm not able to answer those questions, I'm going to frame them within this recording, and then I'll include that in the FAQ. So hold on. First, I want to frame the question, and then we'll look at a response potentially. So the question is what sort of process has been reduced? What's the process look like? Given what was done, I think just to kind of broaden it out here, given what was done in 2021 as a part of the pilot program versus what we're looking at doing today. So in 2021, the pilot program included it in being embedded into the ADU laws and regulations. And with that, it included several requirements, including decks, obviously the requirement for connection to sewer, a third-party ANSI inspector that was beyond what is already done in factory. So it was a third party beyond what's already being done in the factory. And that what we found with all of those pieces is it added time, a lot of research for the homeowner and or the builder, and a lot of times it was more a headache than it was worth. So that application process, I mean, I want to say there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 applications that just were people just applied and then withdrew the applications once realizing what the process looked like. I think if you're looking at time, probably. I mean, the third-party ANSI inspector, I think that was a nominal fee, but the time involved in that, I mean, in a 2-year time period, we had 2 that were built, a third one that took beyond the 2 years to get it sited. So 3 in total is what we have. So in terms of what we're looking at doing today, we're taking those regulations out of the ADU law and having it on kind of their standalone rules. We're taking out the requirement for a deck, which can be expensive. And we're looking at the compostable toilet option as to whether or not that's... And so just to frame the compostable toilet piece, it's not that we're saying you have to do that. We're saying that that's potentially an option as long as you follow the rules. And that's still, okay, so
The sewer connection, what do you do?
excellent question. So, and that's what we're doing the research on right now. So there is the question on if you don't have a sewer connection because you have the waste, you still have the liquids that are coming from other sinks, kitchen, bathroom, obviously, but not the toilet itself, which is that black water. So there's a gray water option that's in the plumbing code currently, and that would be the direction that we're kind of seeing it would have to go. So if you're doing the compostable toilet piece as a theory, you would then have to move forward with the gray water piece and identify the compliance with that. The question that, and we'll work on that through the FAQ, is it handled through ANSI or is it handled through the building code? And I think that is something we need to look into still. So the question is what's the difference between ANSI and HCD? So ANSI, we've already talked about what that acronym means. HCD is the Housing and Community Development Department, which is kind of the right hand of the State Department. HCD handles the ins and outs of housing units, and it also does handle manufacturing units and then provides for the ANSI standards. The ANSI standards are the actual standards you use by which to build the tiny homes or mobile homes, for that fact. No, there's no permit for the manufactured homes. Yes, when you're putting it on a mobile home park, yes, because that's a whole separate process that the HCD has, but not for this. Other questions? So the question is yes. So individuals that live outside of the city, would they be a part of this, or would they still be subject to the county standards? And the answer is you would still be subject to the county standards. I'm not aware of the county adopting or considering tiny homes. I will say this, in the state of California, I want to say there's probably a handful plus of cities that actually have this in place, large and small. So I'm aware of cities as large as Riverside that have these in place, and I want to say Ojai is probably one of the smaller cities that at least had the pilot program, and now we're considering it as an ordinance. Yeah, Ojai. So the answer to that sounds like it's a case-by-case scenario for the county.
It is possible.
Okay. So there's a process involved with the county. Okay. So the response, just to take a little further so it comes into the mic, is you did that in 2016. So 2016 is an interesting time because HCD actually came out with a memo identifying how tiny homes were going to be addressed. And really it talked about really leaning into the ANSI standards and not necessarily any of the building permit standards that are controlled when it's built on site. The same thing is true with the DMV. It identified very clearly that DMV was going to be required when it's on chassis. So. So the question is the ordinance and the discussion that we're having today is within the roughly 4 square miles of Ojai? The answer is yes. Correct. Yes. To clarify that, just to reframe the question, if it's outside of the city, this ordinance wouldn't apply. I'm not familiar with, so the question is the process that was identified earlier in the county on a case-by-case scenario, is it more cumbersome than what we're looking at here today? I haven't had a chance to review that process, but it sounds vaguely familiar to the process that we were using as a part of the pilot program, which included deck requirements and
It's a different.
okay. Okay.
Trailer, and you put it. Change as far as now. Great water system. My background. You know, top of the road, especially the electric ones. It's who maintains them and how they. The average homeowner does the. So, you have to make it up. Training solves that problem. They can be. There's a lot that's happening.
Sure.
California requires that all are supposed to go to environmental.
Right.
Split in this, you could say, how homeowners live within the other one. In a big parcel like your picture show, track. Yeah, that. You can see that.
Yeah. So
I'm not trying to be a.
no. You're providing information. So I want to reframe your question. I know your question then answered some of the pieces you were talking about, but really your initial question was, is there a difference in whether it remains on chassis in terms of how this code or ordinance as drafted versus it being cited and wheels taken off, chassis removed? And the answer is there wouldn't be a difference. Whether it's on chassis or not, the way in which the ordinance has been drafted as it stands as first reading wouldn't have a difference. So you would still have the only thing we haven't baked into the ordinance, and it's the compostable toilet piece you were just talking about, that hasn't been baked into the ordinance. It was brought up as an idea, and then council had asked for additional research, which is part of what we're doing here with this workshop today.
Since you don't. Successful, very common out back, all for those multi-million-dollar homes. They put it, they take it, room, everything into that. What they have
Okay, so a
lined up
cesspool is potentially another alternative. Okay.
It's a 4-foot, 40-foot deep pit, 4 foot. Take it back up.
Mm-hmm.
A cesspool is nothing more than a pit all the way to the decomposes in that pit. Water percolates down through the gravel. That's one of
Mm-hmm. So it sounds similar to septic is kind of which was part of the concern. Here's what I think will help with the FAQ is I'll include the cesspool piece as a part of the discussion, as well as septic and obviously compostable toilets, and then sewer. So thank you. That's a piece of information I wasn't aware of, at least in Ventura County. I've seen it in other states. Oh, right. Okay, so we have about 10 more minutes for questions. And then if you have additional questions after this 11 o'clock, I'll give you my email. You're more than welcome to frame those, because it's going to help with the FAQ and help in terms of bringing this forward. So go ahead. You're talking about for the compostable toilet. So your suggestion is to look into some sort of checks and balances regarding this. Mm-hmm. So one of the suggestions was, sorry, let me just make sure I'm covering it here. The self-certification piece is an idea. I think there's some potential framing in terms of how that ends up working out, but that'll be covered in the FAQ in terms of one of the ideas. Yeah. Just hold on. A follow-up? Okay. So there was, okay, so the question or concern that was raised regarding remote inspections, and caution is definitely out there. I agree with you 100%. The same thing is true with our building division. While we do accept those, really, if it's a larger build, we'll look at those and consider those, but more than likely when it's a larger piece in terms of a part of the inspection, we're going to be there on hand and in person. Sorry, the gentleman in the back. Okay, so your question is if the build is sited on site, is it permanent or can it be transported off site? It remains, so the question is does it become a part of the home or the property itself? And the answer is it's a tiny home. It's not an ADU. So it could be if it's sited, meaning they take the wheels off and it's placed on a foundation, and then 5 years later someone says, well, I'm taking this, or I'm going to go ahead and sell it to somebody and take it off site. It's no longer a part of the property, meaning it doesn't count as a unit. Now, I want to also caution and identify through HCD, which was one of the comments, was what is HCD? And it really governs a lot of the units that we have on site and gives us kind of a playbook of what we're supposed to be doing over the next 8 years. Recently, as a part of our annual progress report, and we've done this for the last 2 years, we've included these tiny homes as a part of our unit count. The unit count is referred to as RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment. So it was accepted the last 2 years. So while your question on whether or not it becomes a permanent unit, we're considering it a permanent unit, but the reality is it's not, because it could be sold and then taken off site. Unlike an ADU, which is there. So the question and comment was when the assessment was done for Carol's property, or the one that you manage, that the assessment was done for the deck that's there because it's in the ground, but it wasn't done for the tiny home. Mm-hmm. Correct. The deck requirement. So the deck requirement was a part of the pilot program. Question. So the question is when it's taken off the chassis and then put back on 3-5 years later, does it have to be recert 10 years later? Does it have to be recertified? And I think the answer right now is no, is what I'm hearing, or at least seeing. So just like you would a regular vehicle, yes. He is the building expert, yes. So a couple of things. Daniel, you can if you want. He is going to be at the open house. You're not going to go to the open house. I invite everybody here to go to the open house. If you want to see a tiny home in action, your best opportunity is today and tomorrow. Well, so the question is whether or not some of the requirements are going to be out there. They're still up for question, including the sewer and the deck piece is off in terms of the first reading. It could be put back on in terms of the conversation. So at this point, some of those things that you have out there is kind of an overbuild compared to what the new ordinance is as proposed. So there so the question points to responsibility and time in terms of rentals, and there is some responsibility and some actions that need to be taken in consideration. Like I said before, the composting toilet piece is what we're kind of quote unquote digging into right now, and we're trying to understand some of those pieces, because there is this maintenance piece that would certainly have to be built into. It's not to say, oh, just go ahead and do compostable toilets. There's got to be some checks and balances attached to that, I would think. So So your question was in regards to affordable housing, and that is an excellent, extremely low affordable housing. So my response to that, and I'll probably put some of that in the FAQ and maybe dive into a little bit more. Council is actually looking into ways to kind of provide a carrot and not necessarily just a stick. So it's some sort of an incentive for something that you're talking about here. Taking this ordinance out of the ADU law and having it as a standalone takes away that neglect of, because right now ADUs we can't do a deed restriction. We can't deed restrict ADUs or accessory dwelling units to be affordable. There's an argument that they're affordable by design. I would say that it's not up here, maybe in some other areas, but with the tiny homes, you have an opportunity potentially there. I think you're onto something in terms of tiny homes. The question is how where does that end up landing? I'll put some information in the FAQ to kind of provide some guidance, but it's kind of up in the air in terms of how that could be addressed. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I got to get out of here pretty quickly, but please come to the open house if you want to talk more about the actual build process and the certification. Daniel Griffiths. Sorry, Griffiths. I'm local to Camarillo. We build our tiny homes in Camarillo. We're the ones that got 2 of the tiny homes here permitted and brought through the process. The whole point of bringing the composting toilet system onto the table was that there are people who cannot physically connect any ADU, tiny home, anything to a septic or sewer line because of where their property is located. I had a customer who was looking to do a tiny home. Their property had a creek that ran through it. And so the only place for the tiny home was on the opposite side of the creek, not allowed to run a sewer line under the creek, not allowed to put a septic tank, not even allowed to put a cesspool because of the creek. So the only option that they had was a composting toilet, and at the time it wasn't allowed. We're not looking to do composting toilets as option number 1 for everybody. The concept is it is the last resort for people who can't do any other option. It can be. One of the tiny homes that we had put in, because there are multiple sewage systems in Ojai, one of the tiny homes, the cost for permission to connect to the existing line was $6,000. One of them was $16,000. Just permission, not the physical lines. The actual cost of running the lines was more like $4,000 for the smaller unit and $17,000 for the larger unit. So it is a range of costs and it's a range of fees. If it is cost prohibitive and someone can apply for the composting toilet waiver or however we want to put it in the ordinance, then it makes sense to do the composting toilet. But I just want to make it clear, at least from my perspective, we're trying to bring this as an option for those who can't do other routes for a tiny home or an ADU, or whatever we end up doing. But this is just a last resort. So. I think that is a great idea. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would love that. I would love it to be. Hopefully June.
Sorry. Well, hold on. There was as a part of that discussion and to Rule's point, all five identified that there was definitely an interest. It wasn't like, oh, I don't know. There was definitely an interest in it. Now, how that ends up getting framed, I think, is the conversation piece, and we're working through that right now. Part of the discussion that we're having today, obviously. In terms of when this is coming back, I believe that we had earmarked the first meeting in June for this to return. So you should expect it then.
More efficient, bigger,
Mm-hmm.
the other from Puerto Rico. The other ones. That's all. But great water pipe. I would never let them.
So
I know I'm being hard.
so the comments came in regards to the composting toilets and the different variations, as well as the gray water piece. There'll be information in there covering the gray water piece as well. Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. I'll see you soon. Carol, do you need to take off too? You can, yeah, it's the biggest, smallest tiny home I've seen. So it's on the west side of the property is what she's talking about. There's a large tree that's a part of the alley that frames Sane Center. Yes. Yeah, so it's, yeah, and just to the west there, you can't miss it. Yep. All right, any other questions, comments? Okay, so with that, I appreciate everybody for being here. Again, if you do have additional questions or comments, you can email me. I'll give you my email after this. But just for the record, it's Lucas Seibert, which is LUCAS.Seibert, which is SEIBERT @ojai.ca.gov. Thank you.